Okay.
Perfect. All right. Well, welcome everybody to our, I guess this is our first training of the semester. So we're really excited to have so many of you with us today to learn more about Navigate. Our training today is going to be presented by Joy, Amanda, and Jen. So I will go ahead and turn it over to them. And like Joy said, we have a poll going as you come in. We'll leave that open till maybe about, do you want to say like 10 after?
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay, perfect.
Sounds
So I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Joy.
Okay, so just to be clear, can you see the presenter's version or the all the crazy stuff? Do you just see one screen or do you see multiple screens with me?
I just see one screen.
Perfect. Okay. So again, welcome everybody. We're going to leave the Navigate quiz up just a little bit to collect a few more responses. And I really want to thank you for joining us. We do have a small group of people to demonstrate Navigate campaigns for advising and to talk about how best to set that up, what you can do with it once you've run a campaign, and to offer help going beyond this training if you're interested in figuring more out. And as we get started, I do want to take just a moment to indicate what core competencies this training covers. For newer advisors who may not know, the National Academic Advising Association, or NACADA, as we call it, is our professional organization, and they have identified 20 core competencies that advisors should master over the course of their career. We do these a lot. We just don't normally talk about what we're doing and why they're competencies. This particular training covers a couple of them, and those competencies can be broken down into basically 3 buckets of information. So some of them are conceptual, so that's things like advising theory, how students learn. Others are informational, that's the tools we use, the policies and the procedures that we as a major, as a department, as a college, etc. And then the third is relational, and that's really how we do the work of advising, how we do what we do. And this particular training covers probably more than 2, but the 2 that are the most relevant are an informational competency, so information tech applicable to relevant advising roles. It's the 7th one. And then the relational one is also the 7th one, engage in ongoing assessment and development of the advising practice. So again, we do these all the time. It's just that we don't necessarily talk about what we're doing while we're doing it. And I think that's a good habit for us to get into. So that's what we're building today. This is why it's important. So in a lot of the exit surveying that we've done for students, advising consistently received high scores. I think that's a really important thing to highlight. In virtually every single kind of poll we've ever given students, our advisors are incredibly impactful and students have good things to say. But that said, students have also commented regularly on what they perceive as the lack of consistency or the unevenness of the experience. And some of that's a little difficult to work with because we know there's definitely one size fits all approach when it comes to advising students. But there are some things that students can expect to have in common. Degree works notes are a really good example of that. Every student should understand where they are and expect to get them, right? And then sometimes the way that they schedule with an advisor can make a big difference in the consistency and feeling of standardization of the experience. Especially if students are coming in through new student orientation and Navigate is the way that they will be scheduling with their advisor, it sort of sets up the feeling that, okay, this is how we schedule. This is the way that I can expect my advising appointments to come in. And it creates some smoothness, especially as we know students go between colleges and majors, etc. If the scheduling process is pretty much the same, then students receive reminder nudges and things like that. We can kind of make the experience a bit more standard. There we go. But in addition to their own experience, it can help streamline our own work. If we use Navigate's logistics to help remind students of their appointments and let the tool do the work for us, instead of trying to manage it with our human resources, this also gives us information about the student experience while kind of taking that piece of it out of your day. Getting that information is something we'll talk a little bit more about in a bit, because gathering that is a very important piece of this conversation, something that I've noticed in conversation with other advisors across the university and advising leads is the need to tell the story more effectively about our work. So, for example, in our most recent set of surveys, which are the PI and the STAY surveys, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with that, that is a survey given to juniors at WVU and their families to get a sense of why they stayed at WVU. We exit students to death when they're getting ready to leave, but this is the one thing we do to judge why they stayed, right? Our most recent survey, advising ranked #1 as the most utilized service that created the most impact in student outcomes. That's a really big deal. That's us. That's our work, you know. Our 4-year graduation rate, as you may have heard, has improved several percentage points this last cycle. That is directly related to CPOS, students getting through their programs in a timely fashion and keeping their aid, right? But we're the ones on the front lines of those efforts. We seem to have a mismatch in getting our story out, or we have the story, but not necessarily the data to back it up. And Navigate campaigns can help us tell some of this story, and we'll see a little bit more of that in just a second. And as a brief example, we all know students have been ghosting us in the classroom and in our advising appointments, but an advising campaign can show us not only how many of those students are ghosting, but who those students are at a glance. And we can create a more targeted intervention or pass those names along to someone who can do that and give those students additional support services. So first, let's look at how to set up a Navigate advising campaign. So I will stop screen sharing at this point, and I will turn this over to Jennifer Jones from Statler College. I think it's important to say that because there's a Jennifer Jones at Potomac State. So Jennifer, I will turn that over to you, and we will walk through what a campaign looks like.
All right, thank you, Joy. I would say if anyone has questions, I am happy to talk to you at another time if we don't get to them at this point. And like Joy said, there is a Jennifer Jones at Potomac, so just make sure you get the one that's here on the downtown campus. I am going to show you the way I do it. I know a lot of you already do these. So if you have tips and tricks, if you want to let us know at the end, I think we're going to have some questions. So I think a lot of being a good advisor is helping one another out, helping us do things more efficiently so we can help our students better. So I thought I would start with what I do before I start my campaign. So I did a screenshot of what I do with my Outlook. I use my Outlook to manage my availability. So I go ahead and I put in an admin time. This is just something I do. It's not anything you have to do, but once you make your campaign go live, students have access to everything that's available. So that means if you know you have vacation coming up and you haven't marked it off on your Outlook calendar and it overlaps with your campaign, you may have students that schedule once that goes out. I try to mark out a lunch, whether or not I actually take it or not. I have it on my calendar. And then I have 2 admin times, which are really helpful when emails are high traffic. So sometimes keeping up with emails and appointments can be quite a bit. I don't always get those as admin. Sometimes appointments go late or someone walks in, but I at least have them to kind of buffer. So taking care of my Outlook is what I do first. And then what I do is I come up with a list of my students. So you can pull a list from Navigate. I don't always trust that list. I'm probably not supposed to tell you that, but I don't. So I have a list that I keep. So as students switch majors or come into the major, I know who my actual list is. And it usually varies a little bit from Navigate. So I use my list whenever I make a campaign. So I have that on Excel and I've already kind of got that in order. Let me see. Okay. And then something else I do is I go to, see if I can get around my Navigate controls. I also go to Zoom and I go to my personal room and then I copy my invite list because I'm going to use that when, so I'll leave that up. I'm going to use that as I make my campaign. So let me pull this down so I can go to Navigate. So I kind of have all those ready, kind of consider it as like if I'm baking and I have all my ingredients ready before I get started, it just makes it easier for me. I usually start my campaigns really early. So probably it may shock you all. I started the 3rd week of the semester. I often have type A students that want to get in as soon as possible. Some want to see me the 1st week, which I don't let them do for registration for the next semester. So I go ahead and the 2nd week of classes is when I'm preparing my campaign. That's not what I'm, but do whatever your unit does or what works for you. So the other thing I do is I make sure my availability is set. We have one remote day for Statler. So for my remote day, when I set that up, it's virtual only. That's the only option students have if they make an appointment with me on a Wednesday. Now, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, it's their choice. They can choose to meet with me in the office or they can choose virtual. I don't make them come see me in person when I am in the office. It's their choice. A lot of our students are taken classes in both campuses. So I think this allows a lot more flexibility for them. I also do like from the morning to the afternoon as one time block because I've used my Outlook calendar to block off lunch or block off the admin time. So instead of creating a morning and an afternoon or a daily availability, I try to do the easiest for me as possible, which is 2 different slots. So I have that set and I go ahead when I do my availability, I set mine for spring. People do that differently, but that's just what I do. I also use my personal availability link a lot. I actually have that on my signature and I even put directions at the bottom so they know how to do that. It used to be I would set up a second campaign for students who had already met with me once, and I would tell them they could, if they wanted to see me more than once, I would add them to that, 2nd or 3rd appointment campaign. So then they could have the link, but the personal availability link took over that for me. So I no longer use that, but you always could if you wanted to. So this just makes it easier and seamless for them to make an appointment. And then targeting hours. This is something some units use, I think. I don't know if you're familiar with this. You can put how many target hours per week that you're hoping to advise. Some people will do this in lieu of like admin time on their calendar. This is my first semester trying it. If you have a lot of appointments during the week, this doesn't help because it gives the students access to 30 hours on your calendar or however many you set on here. So that is something you can use. You don't have to use that though. So again, all kind of prep work before we start. If you want to do a list, you can go here to list. And one little warning about Navigate, I notice it tends to take a while to load. So just be patient with it. But you can do a saved list, and I have ones for probation, different things I've used when I've taught. I've kept it for my class. Again, I usually go with Excel now. You can also go here to campaigns. I think it's a couple extra steps. So I usually go to the home and then I scroll down here to appointment campaigns. And I should give a shout out to Regan Bruni and Barbara Molyneux. When I first started at WVU, they did a training with me. So a lot of what I know, I learned from them. So this is a list of like my current campaign, my previous ones. But if we want to go to a new one, we can add new. And something nice to know is once you start it, you can save and close at different points. So you're not stuck at completing it all at one time. Now, some people will name their campaign Fall 2023 registration. Some will do their name. Some will do, if it's mid-year academy, if it's probation students, if it's a check-in, whatever you want to do. There's not really a standard that I've seen or heard from this. So I'm just going to put Jen Jones, Fall 2023, and hopefully I can type with you all watching registration. I don't ever put anything here for instructions or notes for landing page. For care unit, I do advising. For location, I usually click here and type in stat because we're all the way at the bottom. So we're Statler advising. And then for service, you used to be able, I think, to choose more than one of these, but you can only do one. So I do Statler advising. When you're doing your availability, you can do more than one. So I usually will do advising and Statler advising because students tend to gravitate, I think, towards advising. Something that's changed in the last couple of years, Navigate will do, I guess, updates, and you know how things are adjusted just a little bit. When I first was trained, I was told to do 2 or 3 appointments in case students no-show or cancel. It makes it easier for them to go in and reschedule. Well, with one of the latest changes, if you do more than one appointment, every time you have a nudge that goes out, which we'll talk about in a minute, everyone receives that nudge, even if they've met with you once, if they haven't met with you 2 or 3 times through the campaign. This is a headache you don't want to deal with and you don't want your students to deal with. So I recommend leaving this at just 1. You can change your appointment length. You can click on the side here. I usually stick at 30 minutes. Sometimes in the fall, I wish I had 45 minutes or an hour just because we're onboarding and going over so much information. But 30 minutes is kind of standard, and that's what I usually do. Some people go down to 20 minutes. I never click allow scheduling over courses. I don't think anyone should do that. And then I just leave this as is. I want them to receive that text reminder and the email reminder. And I keep the email reminder. I do filter that. One of my colleagues taught me that trick. So all my Navigate emails go into a separate box in my inbox. And then scheduling window. I'm going to go ahead and post-date this a little in case I accidentally hit verify as I'm talking. All my students aren't going to receive this. But like I said, I usually will start this the second week of classes, and I usually go ahead and open it the second week, but I don't actually start my availability until that Monday of the 3rd week of classes, but that's just me. So just make sure whenever you're ready to start that that's reflecting it. And another tip that I think is really helpful is I usually start my end date before before registration begins. Now I know that I can go in and edit it and I can extend that end date for my campaign, but I don't want my students to see, oh, I have until May to go in and see her. I want them to come see me earlier rather than later, and then I can keep extending it as I need to. Just to kind of help push them to see me earlier in the semester. I'm going to go ahead and put April 28th, which is after registration, but just so we have enough time to look at a couple nudges. So at this point, we can save and exit if you know how to walk in, come in, or need to do something else. But we're going to hit continue. And again, it takes it kind of a second to load. So there's a lot of ways that you can pull over students. You can go to assign to. Again, I've seen some things happen if students or if advisors are teaching a freshman seminar. Sometimes those classes or those students have got pulled over. So I just go to my Excel doc, I copy the list, and then I go up to this little box, I hit Control V, and you'll notice that there's a space in between the 800 numbers. That's fine. You don't have to go in and insert like a semicolon or a comma. The space is fine. So then we'll go down and we're going to do something different. We don't go to continue. We want to hit search. All right. And so that shows us our big box of 800 numbers and then our students here. So something I recommend is keeping track of how many numbers. So I knew I brought 149 over. So that matches. Sometimes I'll kind of just make sure that these are my students and I recognize their names. So a trick for this is we don't hit continue next. Luckily, it does stop here and say we need to choose at least one student. So we would go down under search and we would click this little box here. Oops, let me get that. Sorry, the poll just popped up. The actions, you can click on this. There's often different things we can do, but I want to click here. Now, this is something that I feel like changed this semester. It used to be you would click this and it would click all the students, but now it only does the first page. So you want to make sure you select all 149 items, or else you'll have to go back and input the rest of your students. So you just want to make sure they're all inputted, and then now we can go down and hit continue. It's going to show us the students again, I believe. So we can just review. I don't really spend a lot of time reviewing. I just make sure that the number I started with is the number I ended with. And so then I continue. We don't have to click anything at that point. And then it should show you everyone who is a staff member in your unit. So you may be tempted to add a few of your colleagues to your campaign to help you out, but you just want to choose yourself. And then you can see my availability is there. So I'm going to go down and hit continue. All right, and then this is where we can add the welcome message and the nudge. The nudges I think are really helpful because before the semester gets too busy with, nonstop students and emails, if we can go ahead and have this in place, it's just one less thing we have to worry about. A little tip, you may want to mark down on your, Outlook calendar when the nudges are coming out, because you can usually see a spike in appointments being made. So here and I will tell you, I've never used a success message. That maybe if that's something you all do, maybe we can talk about that at the end. I send all my students an email once I've met with them. So I do an individualized one, but for the welcome message, let's click on add that. Again, it takes it a minute to kind of load. And so this kind of lets you know what the students see. So the nice thing to know is we can change anything that doesn't have like the parameters here. So I'll usually go up and put schedule your fall 2023 advising appointment. And then I'll kind of leave this here, but then I'll go down and put, if you prefer a Zoom meeting, the Zoom link will be in the additional details box on your confirmation and reminder emails. And then I always put Jen at the bottom. It just feels a little friendlier than just thank you. You can kind of add whatever if you want to add more than that. And then I'll often kind of copy this. So then that way I have it when I do the nudges. So then we go down, it kind of shows you what it'll look like. If you want to add a document, like sometimes I have a spring calendar that shows them when important dates are. So if you wanted to add that to the first one, you could. If you have any resources, you can add attachments. So we're going to do the send date, and I'm going to change this to the 24th. So again, in case I accidentally hit verify at the end, my students don't all get it. So I'm going to save that. And you don't have to make any changes. I just try to make it more catchy for students when they're looking at it. So then our nudge is basically a reminder email. So it starts off the same. Again, it takes it a second to kind of settle. So here I'll usually put first reminder, schedule your fall 2023 advising appointment. And I'll even do that here. Now, something else I do is when I meet with my students at orientation, I warn them that this will come the second week of classes. So they're kind of trained after they've been with me a semester or so to know when this will come out. I also will send out a mass email to my students and let them know, okay, tomorrow I'm going to be sending out the appointment campaign. Watch for that. You can go ahead and get on my calendar. Another trick to sometimes do is, if you have a lot of graduate or seniors, priority students, juniors, sophomores, and freshmen, and you want to kind of give your students who register first dibs at your calendar, this takes a little bit more legwork, but you can, maybe let them know in the email that you send ahead of time. If you do that you're going to give them, first dibs, and then every few hours you'll let the next level go. That's what I did last time. I, in previous years, have set up separate campaigns, but that's just more legwork. So I usually will send my priority, my seniors and my juniors, because I don't have as many of those. I'll send it to them in the morning. And then usually midday, I send it to my honor sophomores and sophomores. And I'll just go in and I go back to edit campaign. I go to add students and I'll list that. I'll add that list of students there. And then it kind of allows me to go through, and then I can send the welcome email to just the ones I've added. Then at the end of the day, I'll send it to my freshmen. Again, that's not anything anyone has to do. It's just something I've done for a few years. And I think there's something about the wording that they like if they think they're getting first dibs at something. So it kind of helps them schedule. Now, if you haven't used a Navigate campaign, something to be aware of is your schedule will fill very quickly. It's not uncommon to come back from, emails or, looking at the end of the day after you've sent it and maybe be booked out for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks back to back. So just be prepared. And again, that's why I talked about making sure your Outlook is set up. So then here, I'm going to just copy that reminder that the Zoom meeting link is going to be in there, confirmation and additional details. And so we're going to set this. I usually set mine, depending on how long my initial campaign is, about every 2 weeks. So let's just say March 8th, and then we'll save the nudge. And then depending on how long you let your campaign run, you could do a couple of them. Usually I get a little more, I don't know, maybe severe sounding as it goes. So I'm going to put second reminder. You could do urgent, critical, whatever you want to do. Fall 2023 advising appointment. And so then again, I'm saving this, putting here second reminder, may, do something different there. Not signature. And then down here, I can see, okay, I'm sending my first one out February 24th, my second one, March 8th. So then my next one will be 2 weeks later. So I'm not going to do any more than that. I just want to show you how to do a couple of those. So we save the nudge. It's going to prompt us to do more, but I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. And I think something that can be tricky about this is we only usually do one once a semester. Again, if you do separate ones for different, things going on in your office, you may do it more often, but I feel like that always makes it a little trickier to try to remember, like, oh man, I haven't done this in 5 months. What do I do? So this is just a good recap to make sure there's nothing glaring. Slots per time, I don't think I mentioned that. I always keep that at 1. I don't want 2 students making an appointment at the same time. I have had friends that have wanted to come see me at the same time. I'm fine with that. I just make them do back-to-back appointments. Only 1 staff member, so that's all right. I'm going to minimize this for a second, and then we would start the campaign. So I'm not going to actually start the campaign because I don't want this to go to my students. So I'm going to hit save and exit. But when you start the campaign, it'll ask you to verify. You'll verify and go through. So something that's good is if you want to go in and just kind of play with it, but not actually get started, you can go in, play with it, and then you could hit delete if it was just a practice one, or you can always hit resume. Joy, would you like me to show them like how I can see who has made an appointment, who has already came to their appointment, who still needs one?
Yes, that would be perfect. Thank you.
Sure. So I'm going to go to my fall 2023 registration campaign, maybe. Again, I can see the little ping pong ball. Okay. So there's 146 students right now in this campaign. 79% of my students have made their appointment. 67% have attended. And then it says 80% of what appointments have been made have the summaries are completed, but these 2 numbers match, which is important for me. So basically after the appointment, when I go in and mark that they've attended, that's kind of showing up there. So we can go down here and it gives us some metrics. I always click show more, and then you can go back up. So you can see when the first one was sent. So again, I did it back January 18th. You can see how many emails were sent, were opened. And I did the 3 because I did my seniors, juniors, priority first, and then so forth. And then these are the nudges. And I accidentally had marked 2 possible appointments. So quite a few of my students got both nudges. So I had to go in and fix that. But I can see how many students have already made their appointment with me, appointments that are not yet scheduled. And so this is something that can be helpful. Let's say, you only want to make 2 or 3 nudges, but you still don't have everyone scheduled yet. You can go here and click everybody, go to actions, and you can send them a message. So you can send them an appointment request or a message. And that's a good way of kind of targeting the students who are left with like, hey, are you coming back in the fall? Anything I can do to help? We know there's often reasons students wait to come see us. So trying to make it as welcoming and not intimidating as possible. But you can see the summaries: created and eligible appointments. I don't usually use these 2 very much, but the not scheduled and scheduled are helpful. So, but then also seeing how many people are actually looking at it and clicking on the links. Once your campaign is made, you can edit the campaign. So I can go there. And it takes it a minute. So I think my campaign is only going through March 3rd right now, because again, I wanted to front load them. So I can go in here and I can update it and do it till the 10th, which is right before spring break. Now, sometimes what I'll do is I'll block off spring break, but then as it gets closer, I'll open it up on my Outlook and then I'll send a message and say, if you want to meet with me over spring break, I am available. But I try not to leave that open because they'll accidentally make an appointment, not realizing it's spring break. And then they ghost me. They don't attend the meeting because they didn't realize they would be traveling. So then I would hit continue. Oh, and the start date needs to be today. Okay. And I'll just go through. So I'm not going to add any students, but if I wanted to add students, this is how I would do that. Go to continue and so forth. But that's basically how you set up a campaign, how you make adjustments to it. And then you can always save and exit, which I'm going to do. Joy, anything else you want me to cover?
Can you look at a previous campaign and see who did not make that appointment? And can you get a quick view of those names?
Sure. So I did mid-year academy appointments over winter break. So I did not have good attendance at that. So only 10 of my students made appointments through the campaign. And so I can see that, let's show more, that was the nudge. So this was our original sent. Only 16 of the 21 actually opened it, and only 6 of the 16 clicked on the link. Then the first nudge, 15 emails were sent, 14 were opened, and 7 links were clicked. So you can see like they're usually opening the emails for the most part. It's just not clicking on the links. And I would say often when it's mid-year academy, we know that students are often going to take a break after that. Some of our students that did not do well, or maybe had life happen, life is still happening and they need an extra semester. But then I can also go to the appointments not scheduled. I can see each of those students. Now, sometimes something that happens is a student will make an appointment on my personal availability link, not through the campaign. So I try to go in when they do that and remove them from the campaign so they don't keep getting nudges when we've actually met. I'm a little more concerned about being available to them than my numbers on here. So, so if they find me a different way, I'm okay with that. And then sometimes students can't meet when I'm available. So I'll meet with them in the evening or at a different time. And that's only, a rare thing that happens when they're working or or like a lot of our students have 3 different labs in a semester. So their schedules are really tight. So then they're not usually going to come into the campaign because their appointment's outside of that. Anything else, Joy, that you wanted to see?
So I think if you'll leave your screen up for just a second,
Sure.
Amanda DeBastiani is kind of our go-to person for all loads of questions. And she's been answering them in chat and also answering them individually with other people. Amanda, would you like to talk about some best practices with setup that you've seen from having dealt with a wide range of people's campaign requests and things of that nature?
Yeah, sure. I think, Jen did a great job of kind of walking through. I will say, as somebody who's worked on this since we first implemented it at WVU, this makes my heart so happy to see so many people who, are interested and who use it. In a way, I'm not an advisor. And so when I see things like Jen walking through how she does this, it's really great because you all are going to learn more from her than you probably will from me. And we're at that point, so that's fantastic. A couple of things I think I just want to touch on. Jen mentioned, I don't trust the list, her student list in Navigate. That's not a new comment, but one thing I do want to kind of talk about that a little bit is kind of like a housekeeping. The list, your student list come from what's in Banner. So if your list in Banner is not correct, then that's what you may see in Navigate. So that's always a good place to start by kind of making sure. Some folks who have been doing this for a long time know that already, and they kind of double check those lists and make sure everything lines up. But we have some who don't even, didn't even think about that. So as if you have somebody who's changed their major, if the new advisor never went in to claim them in Banner as kind of that new relationship, even if you ended it, they will continue to show on your list because Navigate as a system, and really WVU as an institution, made the decision we don't want any student to fall through the cracks. So if you ended an advisor-advisee relationship and a new advisor didn't pick that up and we didn't have that in place, the student would never hear from anybody. And so that kind of executive decision was made several years ago to say, well, if they at least hear from the wrong person, they'll know that it's time to make appointments, or they'll know that they need to reach out to their new advisor and say, hey, my old advisor sent something about it's time to start scheduling, or whatever the case may be. Why am I getting this from them and not you? And it kind of prompts that conversation. So that's one thing that I just wanted to make sure of. We reiterate this kind of each time of make sure that your list and Banner is cleaned up. And then if you're, if you notice that there are groups, and we do have some who don't necessarily use, they use Soul instead of using Banner. I mean, they use Banner, but they don't think about using Banner. And so that's kind of another prompt of just making sure that we make sure that those lists are the same. The other thing that happens, and another reason you may have somebody on your list and Navigate that is not in your list otherwise, when the registrar's office, if a student makes a schedule or makes a major change after the first 2 weeks of the semester, the registrar's office does not change that relationship until I think it's the end of the semester. But immediately Navigate recognizes the new major. So you may see someone, if you're pulling a list from your major, you may see somebody who's in your major who you did not see, but you will see at the end of the semester. So that's another thing. I don't know that there's really a right or wrong way to address that, but I will say that that is another reason that you may see something that's a little bit different. So all that aside, because that's kind of that first thing that I always want to remind people of. The other thing when we talk about best practices, you'll notice if you're new to Navigate, there are a few different ways that you can do this. We have, I think just one group on campus right now who allows their advisees, or they allow their students to see any advisor within their college. So they will have it set up so that when a student goes in, they can choose any advisor that they want, who they want to choose. Most other colleges have the requirement that they can only see the advisee, they can only see the advisee or the advisor that they're assigned to. So that is a conversation, and I will say there's no right or wrong answer. I think for a smaller college, that allowing them to see any advisor probably works pretty well. But I think that that's something else that if your department is or your area is starting to use Navigate, you might want to talk about what's going to make the most sense for you. And again, I say, you know, there's no right or wrong way in that case. You just need to do what you think is best. Other than that, I mean, I think, you know, the real thing, I was happy to see, you know, Jen touched on the whole updating your Outlook calendar, because we have a lot of folks who will go in and add their availability in here. But if you're out on a Monday for a dentist appointment, or if you have to call out sick or whatever the case may be, if you have your calendars linked, you can go ahead, or synced, you can go ahead and go into your your Outlook calendar and update that availability or that change or the appointment or whatever, and it will automatically make that an inaccessible time in Navigate. So there's a lot of those, you know, and again, she really touched on all the stuff that we kind of recommend that people do when first setting up their campaigns. You can also, as she mentioned, you know, you can add people to a campaign, you can remove, you know, you can take them out of a campaign if you want to. You know, that campaign, although you set and send at one point, it is something that you can go in and change. We do have some folks who like to do a campaign just for freshmen, a campaign for sophomores, a campaign for juniors, and then we have others who will manage it all through one campaign, and then how they release their availability and their timing. So again, I feel like I'm not giving best practices. I feel like I'm saying more like this system can adjust to what you think makes the most sense for your area. I will say there are now lots of folks on campus who have been using it for several years. And so if you have questions about what works for different groups or how different folks have it set up, you probably could talk to either myself or Joy to kind of get that overview of how it works university wide. And we could at least connect you with folks who are using it individually, those super users, if you will, who could give you some more maybe better advice. So I don't know if I really touched on, Joy, what we expected, but is there something else you'd like me to talk about?
There is, and
Okay.
actually, Jen, if you will stop sharing, or maybe, yeah, you think you've got to stop first. Okay, and then I will go back to sharing, because there is like current slide. All right, so hopefully this just shows one screen and not craziness. So some best practices that I know, Amanda, you mentioned to me. Some of them are super basic. Do you want to talk for a second about the browser?
Yeah, so Chrome is the browser that EAB recommends. Now, that's not to say that we don't have folks who use Firefox or, you know, Safari or whatever, but Chrome is what they recommend.
And then we've touched on setting your availability. That is something that I know initially for me was a little tricky to get right, and it's easy to forget about. But making sure that you have your availability set is almost always the basic answer. It's kind of like why your furnace isn't working, but did you change the filter, right? Maybe it's not a complicated problem. Maybe it's just the filter. The availability seems to be the filter on the furnace of this whole thing. So sometimes if it's not working the way that you expect it to, it's got to do with your availability. And we've mentioned this in the comments, and we can certainly help you figure out how to do this after the training if this is something you want to do. Consider sending your notifications to a separate folder. It will drive you batty, especially if you have a lot of students, to hear their dings coming in regularly, and it will just push your email down as it starts to come in. So if you can just set it to automatically dump into that folder, it's smoother and it's a little less disruptive. Jen did an excellent job of showing how you can customize your nudges, and I would really, really encourage you to work with your nudges. We know that students typically need 3 to 5 touches on a subject before they actually understand what's going on, right? Or not necessarily understand, but see how it's applicable to what they're trying to do. And nudges are a way of making sure that they're actually getting that information, several times. That said, when they get their reminders, think about when those are going out. If your nudges are, it may be really tempting, for example, to put a nudge 24 hours before an appointment could be made, but that may not necessarily be in the student's best interests. Are the reminders they're getting timely? Just think about that, and that might actually increase attendance. Jen, I did want to ask, do you put reasons or note reasons in with your campaign?
I actually do, yeah. I actually pull my degree works notes over to like the appointment, and I just copy and paste there. That's something I started when I was at Chambers working with retention, and I just have kept doing that. And then, is that what you meant by reason?
Yep. Yep. That becomes important later if you want to search by particular issue. For example, you can search using your notes, but if you don't have any notes there, then that filter is not really going to be, or that search reason is not really going to be available to you. So it's worth thinking about. You don't necessarily have to copy over everything from DegreeWorks. I know that there's a lot of pushback in having 2 separate systems with 2 separate, note-taking capabilities. But sometimes, even if you're just making a note like a student needs an academic success plan, you can search by how many of your appointments were designed that way. Having some reasons for what's happening helps you at a glance see what students were necessarily there to talk about. And I do want to talk just a little bit about how to look at your campaign after the fact. So much of this, just to reiterate, it's only as good as what you're putting into the system. So using it to schedule your appointments, which is fantastic, but you're not marking whether the student actually attended the appointment, you're not going to know what your attendance rate is, right? So even if it's something small like that, how you set up your campaigns and the information you put into it does dictate what you're able to get out of it. So here are some basic things that you'll be able to get out of it right away. You'll be able to tell how students are utilizing your virtual and your in-person appointments. So it's one thing to be able to tell a decision maker that your virtual appointments are really popular. It's another thing to actually be able to show them, right? And this gives us some numbers to how your appointments are actually being used. If someone asks whether your students are taking advantage of your in-person meetings, you can show them. So that said, ensuring that you have a good mix of available times and that those times are appealing is pretty important, right? If you only set your availability for first thing in the morning every day, and then we make the claim that students aren't actually utilizing their in-person appointments, that's not the real story there, right? But it does enable you to talk about utilization rates of your own appointments. I think one of the most important things at this stage, and for the students as we're experiencing them now, that you can get out of a campaign is your no-show rate. So we have been talking for several academic cycles about ghosting and an increase in ghosting, right? This enables us, as a campaign is ongoing and after it's ended, to quickly and immediately see who's not responding or who's not making an appointment. And once we have those names, there's more we can do to find out what's really going on, right? Once we have those names, is it possible for us to either pass those on maybe to a lead advisor to check out whether they're not coming because they changed their major and their new advisor hasn't been assigned? After the fact, do those students go on to land on academic probation? Is this something we can start doing as an alert for students who may need additional outreach? it enables us to really quickly see this, right? And if we aren't using something like Navigate, then what happens is we have to do a hand count. We have to go back literally through our calendar and personally see who's not actually coming. It's quicker. It's maybe faster than if we do a hand count before they hit academic probation, right? And just as an example, I want to just sort of show you something. So here on the right, this is Navigate usage of a particular building, right? So geology and geography from the spring 22 and the summer 22 semesters. Now, it is super important to note, this does not mean that there was no advising happening in G&G during those two times. I know for a fact that is not true. So this is the difference between being data-driven and data-informed, right? Like, this doesn't mean that they weren't advising, it just means they weren't using Navigate to capture it, right? By the fall 22 semester, they'd hired a student success coordinator, and that person, Tara Robbins, uses Navigate to track the results of her students, right? So you can see immediately what you get out of this. So the department can know how many students were directly impacted, the fact that many of them come back more than once, and we have a no-show rate, right? So she can immediately go in and see and tell her department, 7 of them aren't coming, here's who they are. If she wanted to, she could see if they had classes in common and point that out to the instructor and see, do some triage and coordination to see if we can continue to help those students either retain to the university, persist, etc. It's not, and again, it's not that people aren't trying to do those things before, it's just that Navigate makes that quick, right? From a unit perspective, right? So advising leads can check out the overall utilization of appointments. You saw when Jen was doing her calendar that multiple people pulled up into her unit, right? As an opportunity to have an appointment with those advisors. You can see what their overall utilization of those appointments are, including your drop-in usage and availability. And you can make decisions about when would be a good time, if possible, to offer drop-ins based on that. You can also identify times where the team may be freer to do other things, other projects, other trainings, that sort of thing. And so as an example, if we take a look at the Davis College, again, same time frame, this is spring to summer. You can see that people are using Navigate. You can see what the utilization rate is, etc. For some of these things. And then this is when they went to a more consolidated model, right? So they have more support folks. They have a director of advising now. And you can see that there are more students touched by this, more appointments covered. Their no-shows are easy to find. But here you can see, for instance, don't talk to them during this time, right? This is October the 14th, roughly, is when this all happens. So, don't ask anyone to do anything during this time, but they can also see things like when students are coming in, like the peak of when that's happening. Students are less likely to utilize the end of the week than they are the beginning of the week, right? And so that just gives you a really good sense at a glance of what your appointment usage is like. And I would just like to point out, actually, Davis's retention rate is up this year. And if it were me, I would point out that this has everything to do with advising practices and being able to more quickly identify those students who need drop-in, those students who aren't showing up, the additional appointments that you might need, and tracking our practices to really just bolster the belief that the advising units work directly led to the retention of those students, right? That's a numbers game that you can play there. This is basic. It's a good starting point for taking the pulse of what's happening across the semester with your group, right? Often the semester just goes by in a blur, and it's harder to take account of what you've accomplished and at what volume in the moment. It's often just sort of looking back that we have the opportunity to do that. Jay, I think I see that your hand is up. Do you want to go ahead and comment?
I just wanted to say that I commend you on this plan. We've been using similar things at Potomac State College, using Navigate, and Janie Gilbert here has helped us to learn how to use it properly. And it's been successful. Our retention rate is up also this year, and we think because some of these practices have been implemented here.
Thank you for that. Yeah, Janie continues to be one of my go-tos for how things are working and how you might be able to do something at the unit level. And I think, honestly, I mean, I commend the fact that everybody got on board with it. It's not easy to learn something new and to implement it. And I think that's these are our colleagues. If we have questions, we can go to because they have experience with using the tool, right, and taking a look at it. There is a third final thing I'd like to show you. It's sort of a new to us tool, and Amanda turned it on just last week, I believe, for every advisor, and it's called Intervention Effectiveness, right? I'm still learning how to use it, so I will just sort of talk to you about the concept, right? And I hope that it's big enough on your screen. I have a laptop, so mine looks super tiny. But essentially, this is meant to measure your effectiveness of your campaigns. Across the top, I don't know if you can tell, you can search by one population, 2 populations with 1 date, or 2 populations with 2 dates. And initially, what I'm super interested to discover through individual campaigns is the rate of success, or the metrics that it gives you, like student GPA, whether they went on to academic probation, et cetera. For students who attended the appointment or students who did not attend the appointment, right? That is a very basic upfront thing you can track for your students to see, and to tell them, to say, hey, we've measured this. If we can get you in the door, you're more likely to be successful than if you ghost us, right? Or cancel and don't attend your appointments. So we are just now kind of exploring with this tool. If you are someone who wants to play around with this, especially if you've been using Navigate campaigns for a little bit and you want to see what this can do for your own campaigns, please email me afterward. I would love to sort of figure out what all we can do with this particular tool and figure out what to do. So afterward, right? Consider using these campaigns to streamline your work. Hopefully, if you've never used it before for this particular feature, you'll consider using it going forward, because it does do a lot of the reminding for you and gives you a good sense of numbers. If you have used it before, please think about how you might tweak it a little bit to maximize what you're getting out of it, and so that you can move on to really looking at your own appointment data. And our students, we've been having these conversations about ghosting and whatnot for a while now, and they're changing in terms of academic preparedness, how needy they seem to be, as well as many of the soft skills that they bring to us or don't bring to us. So if we can take advantage of the timing of our reminders and the nudging to try to encourage them to come through the door, we know the problem is not when they come through the door. The problem is getting them to come through the door, right? So how can we use this product to get more of them through the door? If you're super excited about Navigate and you love techie things, here are some things that are available to you after this training. I really do feel like it's best to set this up one-on-one and have someone walk you through with your screen and right beside of you or virtually right beside of you. If you want to have some help with that, we are more than happy to help you with this. If you would like to start looking at the details of your own unit, I think we can start doing that, especially with some of the units who have been using Navigate for several semesters in more detail, and see what we can get out of that and talk about how to tell the story of advising through Navigate. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is the platform that New Student Orientation will use to register students for NSO. If that is something that you would like some help with, please let us know. I know that some units, for example, Eberly is working directly to figure out how to do that as a group, right? So if you are in the Eberly College, you may want to check with Andrea or Sam first before you get the individual support and see what they have lined up to figure out. But if you would like some support for your NSO campaign, please just reach out. The recording will be on the website soon. And again, if you consider yourself an early adapter and you are excited to try out some of the more specialized features that we're looking at, please email me, because some of us would really like to figure out how to get a better handle on this and use this information to really tell our advising stories. So again, that's joy.carr@mail.wvu.edu. I will stop sharing because I'm sure we have, oh my goodness, 21 new messages from the time I looked. All right. So I will go ahead and open the floor up to any questions that you might still have, and we'll go from there.
Hey, Joy, I think earlier in the meeting chat, somebody asked how to combine Outlook to navigate, so sync them up, if we could show that.
Okay, is that something that we can show if someone's?
Do you want me to do that real quick, Joy?
Yeah, that'd be great if you could.
So I've already synced, so, but I can show you where you go. So let me share my screen with you again. Okay, I have to remember, let's see if it's calendar. It's been a while since I've done this, so Amanda, I may need you to jump in and getting the ping pong ball back and forth.
Yeah, you clicked on calendar, right? It's just taken a second.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's trying.
Some days it's faster than others, just
Yeah.
like all of us, I guess.
There it goes. So Amanda, a question earlier from someone who doesn't use Outlook very much, they're part-time. If they went in here and put things in, would that be a good way of doing it, or not so much?
Not so much. Well, so, you know, if they don't want to sync Outlook and navigate, they can still go in and set up their availability, right? You know, just like they would. And there are a couple ways of doing it. You can go in and you can set it up week by week. So if your schedule changes from week to week, it's a little labor intensive on your part as an advisor, but that is an option. So you can go into my availability, set my availability, say you're working Monday, Tuesday, you know, and set your times that you're available then. You can, if you work every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, say, you could go ahead and say, when you set your availability, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you could do it for the whole semester. But then what you would have to do is go into your calendar and block off the days where you say you're available, but you're not actually available. And the best way to do that is to schedule a general event in that individual date. So it's really not intuitive at all. And that's probably, and it's a very rare occurrence. So if that's something that we need to do even one-on-one, we can do that. The general event, just as a FYI, because we did used to have folks who would use general event and thought that it was being captured somewhere in their time when you run the analytics. It does not get captured anywhere. So you could never go back and say, I had this many time spent in general event. Some people used to use it for like planning. And they like to try to track their time that way. It does not capture anywhere. So yeah. But going back to the calendar syncing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was, I think, somebody else's question, but I thought while we're here, we could touch on that too. So then going over to settings and sync. All right. So, and of course I have already done this. So mine's going to be a little different. Do you know, Amanda, the steps right here? It's been a while since I've done it.
So it will just say something like sync your calendar. That, I mean, it's really as easy as that. As long as you can get to this calendar settings, then you can select sync and it will run the process and it'll be done quickly. And once you have sunk, whatever, once you've done it once, you don't have to do it again. It stays.
unless you change jobs and your email changes, then you have to do it again.
Yes, and actually, let me just touch on this. That's a good reminder. If you end up being at health sciences, there's a separate way we have to manage that. Not a big deal. Health sciences ITS staff has done a fantastic job, and I really thank Jen Clutter for that, of working with us to figure out a way to sync calendars with the health sciences calendar, but it is not an automatic thing. So if you are a health sciences employee, let me know, and I'll just need to work with ITS to get you added to their bucket or whatever it is they call it, and then get you set up so that you can also sync your calendars.
And you definitely want to sync before you start a campaign. So all that hard work of blocking off Outlook would be for naught.
These are all great questions, and believe me, there is no dumb question about this. And even if you've been told before, it's easy to forget if you don't run the campaigns as often as some other folks do, if it's been a little while since you've looked at it. I know that Amanda has been incredibly kind with the use of her time, but we have several super users like across the university who would also be really happy to show you how they set things up or talk to you about how you might tweak your campaign a little bit. So please do reach out and ask if that's something that you have a need for. Any other questions? That it looks like Josh has his hand raised up.
Hi, I apologize if this was covered earlier. I had some people walking in and out of my office and got a little bit distracted. But broadly speaking, like what kind of, sorry if you couldn't hear me, I forgot about that. What kind of like tweaks have people made using like the data that they receive? Like what are like some big trends that people have noticed that have affected change in how they've done their campaigns?
An advisor who's busy and people are walking in say it's not so, right? I have a couple of things that people have told me about, but we do have some folks who are kind of super users of Navigate on here, and I'll let them talk about how they've adjusted their campaigns overall as time has gone on, once they've taken a look at it. I'll start with one, and that's the success of the nudges. For a lot of folks, I think when we first got access to things like that, we were nudging them a little too closely to when there were available appointments and not stepping back far enough to give plenty of time. And increasing kind of the distance between those nudges, I think, has led to more appointment fillings, for example. So that's one common thing I've seen with some campaigns.
One other thing that I'll add to that, in the reports that Joy was sharing earlier, the screenshots, something nice, I didn't see it captured on the screenshot, but it will also give you a heat map and show you when appointments on a particular day, particular times, particular months are really utilized by students. And so that can really allow someone to adjust their availability to meet it when students are requesting it the most or making those most appointments. So I was taking a look on mine actually just now as Joy was doing that. And so I had very few students who were making appointments on Mondays and Tuesdays, but Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays were more popular with students. So it can allow an advisor either at the individual level or at the center level to really utilize and take advantage of that time to free open time for trainings or meetings or whatever it might be. So I find that heat map can be really helpful in determining when students are actually meeting with advisors.
Ashley, did you still have a question or?
No, it's also in the chat. Kristen just asked what I was wondering about too. On Outlook, do you create the time you're busy or the time you're available? But it's probably in the instructions that Maureen just posted. So I'm good. Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I will say that is something, especially early on, with new users, they would block out time in their Outlook to say that they were busy, advising or whatever. And then it would block out, of course, if once you sync, it would block out and navigate. So they were trying to tell the rest of the world outside of students that they were busy and not able to schedule, but it was complicating things when they were trying to make appointments. So just something to note, it goes both ways. So when you block out, say lunch, then on Navigate, in Outlook, in Navigate, it shows you as not available. But as soon as a student makes an appointment, say 9 to 9:30 on Monday, it will then also block out your time on Outlook and show that you're busy there. So folks will see that you aren't able to attend a meeting or whatever the case may be.
Amanda, I have a quick question. As far as the syncing is concerned, so I'm at HSC and I was able to sync my calendar in the fall with Navigate. And then there was a little transition, I guess, between emails like Microsoft to Office.
Yep.
And once that transition was made, I had to go back in and resync to get it set up again. Are there any other updates like coming to HSC, or now that I've resynced, is it okay?
I don't believe so. That was a change made on WVU's side instead of the EAB side. So and that's really not something that has happened in the, in years. So I think you should be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
anything else? Yes, so we are going, Kayla, I will pull up that email and we will make sure it's all still current with Amanda in case something
Okay.
is changed slightly, and then we will send that out to the listserv so that everyone has the instructions on how to do that.
Perfect.
I really appreciate your time and attention today. I know that I put this together with a group of people and I'm like, wow, this sounds like the most boring thing in the entire world. But it's hard to talk about tech in an exciting way and get people excited about using it and what the possibilities are for our jobs. But I really do feel like it's going to help us better tell the story of what we're doing to folks who don't understand the work that we do necessarily. And again, I know there was a lot of messages in Teams and a lot of messages in the chat. Let's continue working together to figure out how we can optimize this, not just at the individual level, but also for your units as well. Always up to answer questions. So thanks so much for your time and attention. And please just email if you have questions. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. And if you haven't signed up yet for the advising philosophy workshop, we still have a couple seats. We are getting pretty close to closing that event off. So if you're still hoping to attend, make sure you fill that request form out. But thanks for joining us today, and we'll see everybody soon.